A closer look at the issues on the table in the governor's race, plus headlines and a One Detroit look at neighborhood connections that start over coffee and a basket of laundry. Stay there. My Week is coming up.
I have a question. Who wants to go first? To win? Who wants to grow our business? Who wants to make more money? Who wants more job opportunities? If you want Michigan to compete and become a top 10 state, raise your hand. Together, we've turned Michigan around and started moving forward. Now help us build a stronger Michigan than ever. Raise your hand at strongermichigan.com.
Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, Craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
Hi there and welcome to My Week. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm Christy McDonald. We have a full show coming up for you. Just a few more weeks until the primary. We had hour-long interviews with each gubernatorial candidate. We'll fill you in on that, plus debate candidate endorsements coming up. Also coming up for you, we get to the headlines of the week, from the groundbreaking 17 years in the making to Russia and Trump. And then we are heading to the Island View neighborhood for a One Detroit look at how a new combo coffee shop and laundromat is helping bring people together. That is all coming up for you on the show. But we are starting off with some politics. In the last week, the Detroit Journalism Cooperative invited the leading gubernatorial candidates from both parties for extended interviews. 6 of those 7 gubernatorial candidates recently came to Detroit Public Television studios to be interviewed by the Detroit Journalism Cooperative. The DJC includes Detroit Public TV, Bridge Magazine, Michigan Radio, WDET Radio, New Michigan Media, and Chalkbeat Detroit. DJC journalists spent an hour with each candidate, including the Republicans, State Senator Patrick Kolbeck, Dr. Jim Hines, and Lieutenant Governor Brian Calley. And the Democrats, former State Senator Gretchen Whitmer, former Executive Director of the Detroit Health Department Abdul Al-Sayed, and entrepreneur Shri Tanadar. We talked about a variety of issues, including taxes, the roads, water in Line 5, Flint's recovery, immigration, regional transit, marijuana, the redistricting ballot proposal, and a lot about education. We even asked each candidate what kind of car they drive. You might have noticed one face missing in the interviews. State Attorney General and Republican candidate Bill Schuette chose not to participate, despite numerous invitations and scheduling options. Support for the production of the Detroit Journalism Cooperative interviews came from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, and you can see them all online at myweek.org. And we encourage you to take a look at those interviews. You know, it's getting close for the candidates now. The Detroit News just put out their endorsements. So let's bring in our My Week contributors for some perspective. Nolan Finley of the Detroit News, Stephen Henderson of WDET Radio. Guys, it's getting close.
It is.
It's seen a lot of ads.
Less than 3 weeks.
Some ads, right?
Yeah. No, the ads are almost nonstop now.
Are they?
Yeah, you don't watch TV.
I don't have cable.
Well, that's an entirely different. That is an entirely different topic.
So you're seeing ads from like New Jersey.
Yeah, right. You know, I was really surprised to see the Detroit News endorse Patrick Kolbeck and Shri Tanadar. I didn't see that coming, Nolan.
That was the line of the night. That was the line of the night that Stephen actually texted all 3 of us. So you guys have endorsed it. No, the Detroit News endorsed Gretchen Whitmer on the Democratic side and Lieutenant Governor Brian Calley on the Republican side, which might raise a couple of eyebrows coming from the Bill Schuette camp of he's the front runner.
Well, you don't endorse based on who's the front runner. You endorse based on a lot of different things. We felt like we had 2 solid Republican candidates to choose from. We went with Brian Calley because we supported the governor's agenda for 8 years. We think it's been a remarkable results over these 2 terms, and we believe Brian Calley has been a good apprentice, a good lieutenant to him, and has the best hope of carrying on what we think is a very good strategy for Michigan.
I think what was very interesting in the endorsement that Detroit News put out, acknowledging that his campaigning style has been a little too quiet and he hasn't been as politically savvy as he needs to be in this race. But when we sat down with him with the Detroit Journalism Cooperative and he came in for an hour, the depth of his knowledge and was right there, and I really do encourage people to go ahead and take a look at it. But I think maybe that hasn't really translated all the time for him on the campaign trail, Stephen.
He's not a big personality the way Bill Schuette, for instance, is.
A natural politician.
Yeah, I mean, Bill Schuette walks into a room and makes sure that he talks to everybody in that room, and I sort of feel like he's got a little bit of that Bill Clinton dynamic of wanting to make sure that he's got everybody in the room before he leaves, and that's really important.
And it's smart. I mean, I said on Mackinac, watching Bill Schuette and Brian Kelly in action, the folks come home from Mackinac saying, I met Bill Schuette.
And I talked to him, right.
And I talked to him. They came home saying, I saw Brian Kelly, because he could walk from one end of the porch and not stop and shake a hand. And that I think explains why he's lagging in this race.
I don't know how much this figured
We were
into.
impressed, as you were, by his grasp of the issues and this promise of carrying on what we think is a successful governorship.
I think what was interesting also that you put in there, and I want to get your take on this, Stephen, is kind of ratcheting down the extreme right, extreme left conversation and looking towards, well, maybe that Brian Kelly has more of a centrist view that can unite people. What do you think about that? They put that.
Well, I mean, I think there's no question that that's one of the strong questions in this race is, will Bill Schuette's full-throated, aggressive embrace of Donald Trump and all of the things that are going on without even distinguishing? I mean, one of the things that I've been really disappointed about Bill Schuette is his inability to bring himself to criticize the legitimately crazy stuff that Donald Trump is saying. I mean, I think it'd be fine to say I like some of the policy things he's doing, but I think he's inappropriate. He won't even bring himself to say that, and I do think that's going to play a role in some of the voting that happens during the primary. I don't know how much that figured into your calculus here, but it was obvious.
What we said about Brian Kelly is that we believe at a time, very divisive time, he would be better able to speak to all of Michigan. I would be interested to see what Schuette does if he gets through the primary in the general election, because I don't think you can campaign as defensively of Trump in a general as you do in a primary. I think you're going to see that in races all over the country, people weighing that dynamic. Right now, Trump's still got 80+% of support amongst the Republican Party.
Yeah.
You've got to campaign that way in a primary, just as the Democrats have to go crazy left as they've been going because of this Bernie base that is pulling them. It'll be interesting to see how both parties manage to campaign to the vast middle in the general election, because they certainly haven't in the primary.
Quick question for you guys. When do we usually see the last polls in terms of number-wise before
We're seeing fewer overall this time, I think, than we did 8 years ago.
Right.
That's because people have less money
to
be on commission.
And because polls have been disappointing.
Well, it's harder and harder to do it. If you don't do it enough, you get sloppy and out of practice, and the numbers don't mean as much. I would expect we'll see one in the next 2 weeks, right before the primary.
I would hope.
But who knows what it will show.
Let's talk a little bit about the endorsement of Gretchen Whitmer on the Democratic side. I mean, you've had 3 people running very hard there, and when Gretchen sat down and spoke with us, with the DJC, she's very passionate about a lot of things. Again, putting education. We spoke to her a long time about that, and of course, infrastructure. Not just the roads. Only her catchphrase has been caught on by everybody.
I don't like that.
You don't like the catchphrase?
No, I think it's her trying to be folksy, and she's not.
Well, neither here nor there. You know it, and that's the whole thing.
True.
It is getting traction with people. But I think the biggest question surrounding her will be, how are you going to pay for all the things that you do want to do? And I think
tax
that's
the rich,
real.
Tax corporations.
Well,
that's the standard answer.
She's not really giving that answer as full-throated as some of the others.
That's why we picked. That's why we picked with her. It was the best of a mediocre lot, and she was the only one of the 3 who's not a socialist and not so proudly socialist. And plus, she has experience in governing. The other 2 don't have any experience in governing or really in public policy, and she certainly has depth there.
Although I would say that Abdul El Sayed, while I think he's probably a little premature in being in this race at this point, he's the kind of person you want to see do some other stuff. But the way he has articulated an alternate vision of growth, of inclusion, of success, I think has been really, really impressive. Much more impressive than Gretchen Whitmer or Sri Thanedar. And yeah, it sits pretty far to the left, but it is not crazy. The things that he is talking about make a lot of sense. They are things that other states that are far more successful than Michigan are doing, Minnesota being the prime example here in the Midwest. And so the disappointment is that the vessel for that message is a guy who's pretty young, has no political experience, has not run a whole lot of anything in his career, and Gretchen Whitmer, therefore, is a little more qualified.
Let me ask both of you, what do you think the main issue is for Republicans voting and the main issue for Democrats voting in this primary?
Well, I mean, that's a good question because, the economy is bustling along. This should not be a pocketbook year because if you want a job, you can get a job in this state. Now, I think people are still worried about education, but I think the primary issue is because of the turmoil we're seeing at the national level and the unease and anxiety it's creating, I think stability and leadership is a primary
I think this
issue.
is a referendum election on the things that are going on at the national level and the direction that the country is headed, not just in terms of its leadership, but in terms of the way in which we deal with each other. This question of how deep the divisions are between people. I think that's one of the prime motivators for people who are going to show up at the poll.
And I do encourage people to go see and listen to the candidate interviews, and you conducted one as well, Nolan. And one of the first questions that we asked every single candidate is, what is your leadership and your management style? And how do you feel that you're going to be able to conduct yourself and work with other people, which I think is going to be key in this next 4 years and who our leader is going to be in the state of Michigan. All right, time now for some headlines. I like to say so many headlines, so little time. It was very easy to pick out a couple of headlines this week, and I picked one out actually from the Windsor Star for their perspective on the bridge this week. Amazing day as shovels break ground on Gordie Howe International Bridge. From the Windsor Star. So that, didn't they start talking about this in 2001? Wasn't it supposed to be built in 2011? And
I can't remember when that passed the legislature. Was that
passed
11
the
or
legislature
12?
in Snyder's second.
Was it 12?
But the point is, the groundbreaking, which I think people thought we might not see for quite a while, actually happened this week for this crossing. And an interesting time, though, given a lot of the conversations between the trade tensions between the U.S. and Canada. Yeah,
I think the wild card there is Donald Trump. You saw the Maroons in an ad really try to just nakedly appeal to the president to try to stop the Gordie Howe Bridge so that they can build their other one. I'm not sure that that's not something he might warm to.
And that's why the Snyder administration is pushing this narrative that it's unstoppable now because we put a shovel in the ground. Of course it's not. But you're going to see...
Still got to get this customs plaza.
You're going to see a lot of hurry up on that to head off that last-ditch effort.
Okay. All right. The next headline I saw, let's take this one from the Washington Post. And again, it's so interesting with the news. I mean, you can kind of pick and choose what your headline is and kind of where the slant comes from. But White House attempts to clarify Trump's response to whether Russia is still targeting U.S. elections. I have to say that this week, in watching everything that transpired, it was really... it was quite anxiety-producing. It was baffling at times, and then the walk back that the White House is doing and saying what would or would not, and I said no to a question, but it meant I wasn't going to answer the question, not no to the question. I don't know. I'm going to give you first crack at this, Nolan.
Well, I think this had to rattle Donald Trump in the response because you saw almost universal denouncement from Republicans, which has been rare, particularly in an election year. They lined up and
they've been doing a lot of holding their nose and saying, we kind of agree.
So they lined up and said, what the hell are you talking about? And I think that rattled him. His response was just so typical, well, no, I didn't. It wasn't really me. I mean, he should have stood up and said, I got this dead wrong, and I apologize to the country, which he owed us because he humiliated us in front of one of the worst tyrants in the world, and moved on from there with a really tough plan for protecting our election. Because right now it's not about whether he said something wrong or didn't say something wrong. We got elections coming up here in a couple of months, general elections. We need to be sure as voters nobody is in that ballot box except us.
Yeah.
He did say in a CBS interview earlier this week that, he does blame Putin or hold him personally responsible, just like he's the head of the country here, and that
Right.
he would be personally responsible. But it almost kind of reminds me of someone who doesn't stand up to the guy when you're standing right next to him, but then goes back a couple days later and said, "Oh yeah, I really blame him."
It's also true that historically, the presidency is about moments, right? And it's what you say in those important moments. Imagine if John Kennedy had mistakenly said, "Ask not what your country what you can do for your country. Ask what your country can do for you," and then came back the next day and said, "Oh no, you know what? That was a mistake." I mean, it doesn't work. And as powerful as the presidency is, that rhetorical dimension of it can undermine the confidence that people have in a president. And I think this is different than almost everything else that he's done in that way, that it resonated with people.
It's an argument against the unscripted presidency. I don't know what he was doing standing up there with
Right, why was he doing
having
that?
a press conference anyway. That could only go bad. And most of his conversation with American people, most of his communication is unscripted. And I'm not sure that's, given the weight that every word a president says carries, I'm not sure that's the best way.
But I think that people have knocked presidents before for being too scripted. And I do think, though, but it shows the nakedness of the lack of knowledge or the savvy in some situations that, this is such a pivotal moment that the world is watching that I do need to have something prepared.
So George W. Bush is not the best off-the-cuff speaker or politician in the world. But during his presidency, they were very good at not putting him in positions too often where he could make those kinds of errors. At the same time, you had Barack Obama, who's great in those situations, and he was able to do that. No one is managing this president but him.
It speaks to who he's surrounding himself with right now and who's advising him.
I'm not sure even that's true, because I'm not sure there's anybody
who has any sort of
who could
ability.
sort of control him. This is a matter of self-awareness.
Okay. All right. Well, finally tonight here at One Detroit, we're working to bring you more in-depth stories by going out into different communities, listening to what people have to say about the issues that they really care about. This next story came from a community meeting that we had in the Island View neighborhood in Detroit, along with our partners at CDAD, which stands for Community Development Advocates of Detroit. Several people talked to us about the concept of neighboring and how connecting with the people that they live around makes them feel safer, makes them feel more invested in what's happening on their street and where they live. So where is that neighboring happening, especially in a changing and growing neighborhood like Island View? Well, we found it at a new coffee shop and laundromat that also acts like a free community gathering space. It's called The Commons. Take a look. On a sunny Friday morning on Detroit's east side, just along Mack near Van Dyke, you can't miss the Commons. Its crisp construction contrasts with the mini-mart and a vacant lot across the street, a subtle sign of change in Island View on Detroit's east side.
For here to go.
For here would be great. Step inside, you find the bright, steady hum of a neighborhood coffee shop. Behind the counter, Dawn Coffee, yes, she's aptly named, is brewing up her already semi-famous caramel lattes to the neighborhood recycling guys on break, DeQuan Ferguson and Jonathan Maxwell.
It ain't Maxwell House, it's a caramel latte. Can't mess that up. Caramel latte. Caramel latte.
And they make the best
They make the
lattes
best
over here on the east side.
On the east side of Mac. They are the truth. Starbucks, watch out.
There's a mix of studying students that all new coffee shops with free Wi-Fi and a comfortable vibe attract. That's Milana King with her new baby Violet. She lives just around the corner at Mac and Seneca. Been there for 3 years.
Just every time I come here, I see people I know and all sorts of different people.
Beyond the counter, you realize the Commons isn't just a coffee shop. There are rows of pristine washers and dryers, ready for Marcus Holmes, who stays down the street and came for the first time on this sunny morning with a bag of laundry.
This is nice. Can't get no better than this.
So where did you have to go before to get your laundry done?
Well, I was doing it at the house, but my wash machine is messed up, so I take it on my Nelly. Or my girlfriend's house.
So you'd have to kind of travel around with it a little bit.
All the time.
The Commons is a new neighborhood spot created by Mac Development. a nonprofit formed just 8 years ago by the Mack Avenue Community Church to improve life in the 48214 zip code. It's a unique start at creating a space, meeting need, and linking a changing community.
We're running a big experiment, if we're honest, and we're taking a risk on behalf of our people and saying, hey, one of the things, we think people really want to come together. They just don't have enough opportunities to do so where everyone can feel welcome.
Ezekiel Harris, or Zeke, is Mack's executive director. He explained how Mack members went door to door in the Island View neighborhood to ask people what they'd like to see in this space.
Asking people actually, what do you want here? Instead of kind of coming and doing that top-down approach where we tell people what they need. We're like, no. We know in the long run, everything that we do will be more successful based off of talking to people.
And so they said, okay, a coffee shop, that's something that, I mean, everyone can get behind. But then putting in a combination laundromat, but that was really out of need.
Yeah, you know, it was funny because I think there was a bunch of different conversations that were had that led us here to where someone was like, hey, why don't we put them together? And that process, I think, was all based on like, okay, how do we get people together? How do we meet needs of people where they are? And how do we really promote dignity? Because we know, like, specifically around the laundromat, there's not a laundromat within 3 miles of our location. So when we thought about people getting on the bus with their dirty laundry and having to travel, we didn't think that was a very dignified experience. And so we wanted to bring that into the neighborhood to provide that at a high quality location too.
The building, originally bought with $500, ended up with a $1.5 million renovation thanks to fundraising and donations. The grand opening in May, a community celebration and block party that not even the rain could dampen. Free coffee and food trucks, and a varied group of faces that reflect a changing community. But how do you connect people from different backgrounds and different experiences with respect and understanding? Connections with neighbors can make people feel more invested, more a part of where they live, something that Dawn, who lives close by, sees from behind the counter at the Commons.
They socialize. People that would never talk to each other before, they get put in a situation where they sit down and then you see them communicating. And then you hear them say, oh, well, I've lived over here for 30 years. And they're like, well, I've lived over here on this side of Mack for 20-some years. And they've lived 6-7 blocks from each other. They've never met.
So Dawn, explain to me then how that makes a community stronger when you have that kind of connection.
Because if everybody, Detroit is made up of so many pockets. So everyone stays in their own little world. They don't get a chance to find anything out. And you see the people and you're like, oh, they live in an Indian village, they're wealthy, they have it together. And the people from Indian village, like, they're poor, you know, they're trouble, they're gonna bring drama. And then you put them in a space like this and they talk and they get to know each other and you go, wow, oh, you're normal, and well, you're normal too. And then you build a unity.
Building unity, a sense of neighboring or trust doesn't happen quickly or easily. Do you think that the Commons kind of helps that whole neighboring concept?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because if you have a drive-by conversation with your neighbor and then again see them in a more calmer environment here over a cup of coffee, then you can say, oh, hey, I saw you doing yard work. How's that going? And it's easier to like have a space to start a conversation and spend more time together.
Mack Development is also waiting for the Commons to be a signal for more small businesses to take a chance on Mack Ave. There's already a lot of development coming to Island View. That makes longtime residents wary. Zeke says the next focus is to work with developers to be in tune with the neighborhood.
That's really important for the residents who are here already, trying to address their needs first versus, okay, what do other people from outside of the neighborhood want to see happen here? And so we're really trying to push on developers and saying like, hey, we love that you're here, but we don't want people to be pushed out as a result of what you're doing. Therefore, start having those conversations very early around like, what is my positive impact and what is the negative impact of my development?
It's a lot to consider in Island View. But as Zeke said, an experiment worth watching for other neighborhoods around the city as well.
I feel good about it and bringing it back. Like I said, it's about time. It's about time they bring the Detroit back. I love it. I'm proud of it.
You strengthen a community by bringing everybody together. because you can't expect government officials, you can't expect people to come in and just make something happen. You have to actually say, hey, I live here too, and I want to see something better over here. And it starts with something like this.
And for more One Detroit stories, just head to MiWeek.org. And we couldn't do stories like this without the support of the Detroit Journalism Engagement Fund, a project of the Community Foundation for Southeast Michigan. And that's working to increase quality journalism and to help better inform communities. That'll do it. We'll see you next week. Take care.
I have a question. Who wants to go first? To win? Who wants to grow our business? Who wants to make more money? Who wants more job opportunities? If you want Michigan to compete and become a top 10 state, raise your hand. Together, we've turned Michigan around and started moving forward. Now help us build a stronger Michigan than ever. Raise your hand at strongermichigan.com.
Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929.